Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Want to talk about this Time magazine article I came across today. It's one of these moments where a headline catches your attention and you go, "That's how you write a headline." It caught your attention, but it wasn't factually inaccurate. We saw some photos and the stories coming out of New York of the homeless guy who was choked to death, as passengers feared. We don't have all the details, and I don't know that we're going to anytime soon. But the headline was it grabbed my attention. Nobody cares about homeless people until they die, and I'm going, that is the right frame. And I would argue, I would have added to that. And even then, I doubt very few people really care, because we don't seem to be doing much about it. Now, they went into the story of this Jordan Neely, the guy who was killed. And, look, I mean, another story of someone whose life was broken. His mother was murdered by her boyfriend when he was 14. Didn't finish school, got into some trouble, had some drug problems, just a life of one obstacle, one bit of chaos after another, and no stability. And again, one of these things of no family structure that, I wish everyone had, the kind of family structure that would be supportive. Unfortunately, this guy didn't. And this is where I come back to society. Has to play a role in this. They point out that it's been reported he was arrested some 42 times, mostly for nonsense. I mean, this is one of those things. He was arrested 42 times. He's got a rap sheet down the. Yeah, he got arrested for vagrancy, probably for loitering, for panhandling, just nonsense. And instead of having a system that said, "Hey, we're going to deal with this," we had a system that just kept pushing him around. For instance, evidently he hit an old lady. I guess it was in 2021. He was arrested again. He then had a judge said, "Hey, we're gonna put you into rehab, get you some help. Don't use drugs for 15 months, and you'll be okay." Well, evidently he left the place after 2 weeks. A system that did not follow up. And as the article says, very few people cared about this guy until he was killed. And now politically it's become, which camp are you in? Are you in the red hats or the blue hats? Do you got the R or the D? Or you're a conservative or a liberal? We've got our sides without actually talking about the issue itself. And as I said from the beginning, and this was my hot take gut reaction. People in desperate situations do desperate things. And if there's a lack of humane solutions, inhumane solutions will fill the void. And that's what we've seen here. We saw people who were afraid of this guy because he was acting erratically. He was causing a disruption. And the only people who would interact with him were going to do it in all of the wrong ways. The person who got behind him and started and choked him to death, I'm sure, as his lawyer says, he didn't mean to cause any harm. But he was put in that situation where that's the choice he made. And what it is, and this is what's frustrating to me. We have a system that now wants to deal with this individual thing without looking at the much bigger picture. I look at, to my point of, each side wanting their thing. Jesse Waters over at the Fox place. He tweeted out, "White liberals sentenced Jordan Neely to death on the streets, and now they're using him as a talking point." Does this feed the outrage machine? Does this make people on the right, on the extreme, go, "Yeah, those white, it's their fault"? It's crazy to me. especially when you look at the fact that people like Jesse Waters and his ilk have done great harm over the last 40, 50 years in destroying what little safety net, social safety net that could have helped this guy. Years ago, we used to, when I had more time, and I regret not being able to do this anymore, but when we used to do these Hungry and Homeless for the holiday events, where we'd live in a parking lot of a supermarket for 10 days, and a local trucking company would lend us a trailer, and we would fill up the trailer with food and give it to the food bank, and we'd raise money for the homeless shelter, and raise awareness of the issue, and talk about it in a way that we hoped would be constructive, and in a way that we hoped would help lead to solutions and not leave that void. Because again, the lack of humane solutions leads to inhumane outcomes. And, I remember going in with all of the same stereotypical views of people who are homeless. Mostly just people who made bad choices, drug addicts, lazy people, things like that. And what I came away with, and this is when you expose yourself to different ideas, different kinds of situations, different people, you come away with very different points of view. What I came away with is the vast majority of the people we met, they were struggling with mental health problems. Because what we used to do is during the day, we would be there and people would drop off food and we'd interact with the customers coming in and out of the supermarket, and we would, do that stuff. But at night, when consumer traffic slowed down, we invited the homeless people to come out of the woods and out of the places where they were holed up, and we would feed them. The grocery store was nice enough to give us as many hot dogs and hot dog buns as we wanted. So at night, that's what we would do. And we would provide a safe space for them to be for a short period of time. And I was fortunate enough to hear their stories. And the vast majority of them were because at the time, the state had closed down the state mental health hospitals and just dumped these people. They tried. I'm not gonna go as far as they just dumped them, but ultimately they just dumped them onto the streets because the resources to take care of them weren't there, and it rolled down onto the local police departments. So you go, the guy was arrested 42 times. Can you believe that? Yeah, these were the people that I was talking to who were going through the same problems. They didn't see police as their friend, as a helper. They saw the police as someone who was going to harass them, give them a hard time, push them somewhere else, let them be someone else's problem. And what you ended up with are people who were in the shadows, exploitable, abusable, and really desperate. And as I've said before, when there's desperation, when people feel desperate, they will do desperate things. And I remember at the time, I came out and I said, look, I believe this has a lot to do with the closures of the state hospital, the cutting of social safety net funding. Now, this is going back into the early 2000s. And I got a call from the governor's office, a Democrat. No, Rick, you're wrong. It's not the state hospitals. It's not the cuts in funding. We're doing all these wonderful things for these folks. We're doing this wonderful stuff. And the Republican mayor called me, said, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. We're doing all these wonderful things. And I got this thought in my head, if both of them are calling me, if both of them are telling me, no, you're wrong, it can't possibly be, it made me go, I'm right. Because it was bipartisan that, no, we wouldn't do that. And yet, as we've cut these social safety net programs, as we've cut this help, what we've done is we've created more desperation. And I think back to one guy in particular that we met along the way, because look, it can happen to any of us. This was the other thing I came away with, that no matter where you are, what station in life you're at, any bad things can happen. And the reason that I believe so wholeheartedly in having a social safety net that's strong enough to help people in their hour of need is because of Joe. I met Joe, a Vietnam vet, lifelong conservative Republican, never missed a day of work, never collected unemployment, never needed anything from anyone until he got sick. Had a heart attack. And the job that he was working at, shuffling railroad engineers around, driving them from one place to another in a van, they had crummy health care. And, he was in the hospital with this heart attack, and the bills are piling up, and he ends up not having income coming in because guess what? No paid sick leave. So he burns through his savings in no time whatsoever. And his landlord throws him out while he's still in the hospital, while he's still on the mend. Moves all of his stuff out onto the curb, and there's no one to stand up for Joe, no one to advocate for him, no state policies at the time, none of that stuff to help him. So and now he gets to the point where, hey, you can't go back to the job because you've been gone too long, you're out of luck. Now he's homeless, he's unemployable, and he's sick. The state picked up his health care bill because that's what we do through Medicaid, and good on us for doing that. We spent a couple $100,000 to keep Joe alive. And then we kicked him to the street, which is where we found Joe. Because one of the things that we did is when we would do these events, we would go and we'd get a bunch of cardboard boxes, a bunch of refrigerator boxes, and line them up under the trailer, and we would rent them out to people so that they could pretend to be homeless for a night. And for $20, you could play homeless on our Skid Row, and we would donate that money to the homeless shelter. And we gave one of the boxes to Joe, and he, as he said, the 10 days we were out in that parking lot were the safest that he had felt in months. Because he was sick, he was weak, and he was broke. And there was no help for him. And the help that we could get him took a long time to do. Now, when it ended, we ended up renting a hotel room for him for a bit until he could get into a VA center on the other side of the state. And then a couple of months later, he passed. But this is one of those moments where you start going, it could happen to you. It could happen to me. And I know we're told we're this grand religious nation. How can we allow that to happen? Now, I couple that with the fact that there was a Bloomberg report out. An LA Times report out that said life expectancy in the U.S. has declined. And, they go through the reality. It has a lot to do with the fact that, guess what? Policy matters. Inequality matters. The place that has the lowest life expectancy in this country is not a surprise or should be a surprise to no one. It's the southeastern U.S. It's Alabama, it's Mississippi, it's Louisiana, it's Arkansas, it's those states, Tennessee, it's all of the Georgia, it's those states. And not by a little bit, by a lot. And you go, well, it's just the South. Now, the pandemic had an awful lot to do with it. According to the CDC, COVID explains about half of the decline in life expectancy. But you have heart disease, you have chronic liver disease, you've got cirrhosis, you've got suicide, you've got opioid addiction, you've got all of these other problems. And policy tends to be what drives this. The states that have the lowest life expectancy, surprise, surprise. Many of them, eight of the 12 at the bottom, have not passed the Affordable Care Act, have not expanded Medicaid in their states. So are you surprised that people who aren't getting care are dying younger? No. So the question becomes, how do we as a civil society take crisis and take horrible situations like the death of this man and not use it for political fodder, but actually use it as a moment to go, a moment of self-reflection, to say that could be me, that could be you, that could be my brother or sister, that could be my neighbor, and make sure that it doesn't happen anymore. See, this is, again, my problem. The red hats and the blue hats are going after, hey, we're going to score on the other side. How do we fix this problem? How do we move forward and make sure that this doesn't happen again? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Good talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, Donald Trump, today, truth out. I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. This verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time. And then he truthed out again. A very unfair trial. And my thought goes, how does he know he wasn't there? Now, for those who don't know, he was found liable in the sexual harassment case with E.G. Carroll. $5 million was the verdict. I'm surprised it was that little, but maybe the Stormy Fund's got some change left over in it, and we'll see. I'm expecting an appeal. Because, bad news does really well for Trump. Now, the guy must live a charmed life, because today it was announced that federal prosecutors have filed criminal charges against George Santos, the Republican representative from New York. Couple of mistruths, couple of what we used to call lies, some fabrications. He's going to appear in federal court tomorrow. So we will see exactly what he's been charged with. But you know what this does? This takes some of the attention away from Trump and his loss. And my thought today went, is he tired of winning yet? Just my thoughts. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. How are you, Alice?
I'm totally insane. How are you?
Predictably insane. Okay, good. How are you? What you got on your mind?
What I wanted to say was these healthcare costs. When I had my first heart attack back in 2017 and had 2 stents put in, I went in on Monday, and I went home the next day because I made them let me out. To have that heart attack and 2 stents put in, it was over $200,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So the second heart attack in 2020, no stents, same amount of time, went in on Sunday, made them let me out on Monday, had the balloon procedure done on. It was almost $175,000. So these people, if they think that they're safe from these healthcare costs, they're crazy. They're not. And as for Donald Trump, I just keep saying you can't kill evil. So have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, I mean, she's right. I mean, I've known, people throughout the years who they've been just crushed by healthcare costs. And there's only so much that you can dig up out of pocket, because as she said, look, she had a heart attack, had to have, a couple of procedures, 2 procedures, you're looking at over $300,000. Who's got that in a sock in their drawer? Who's got that between the mattresses? Literally nobody. And this is why I keep coming back to, we have this fetish this want to hold on to employer-sponsored health care that ties us to our job without understanding that, one long-term illness could wipe that out. You get sick and you're off 8-10 months, your employer doesn't have to keep you. If you work for a small business, they don't have to keep you a week or two. And this is where, I think about Joe quite often in these moments. Here was a guy who thought he did everything right. Led 70 years of his life, good, clean, by the scriptures kind of living. Good, God-fearing, conservative Christian Republican. And where did he end up? He ended up living in the woods because our system failed him, because the policies pushed by far too many Republicans failed him. This goes back to the Reagan era. This, hooray for me and the heck with everyone else. And look, the vast majority of us are probably not going to end up in that situation because we're going to be fortunate enough to have a safety net of our own. We're going to have family. Maybe we're able to weather those storms. But for those who don't, this is serious. And in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization, at its wealthiest moment, you're telling me we can't solve this problem? And I know this is a big one. This is an enormous problem. We can't even solve the smaller ones. I saw another shooting. Another shooting. A Louisiana guy evidently didn't like the fact that some children were playing hide and seek outside his home. So he decided the best way to tell those children to stop was to shoot them. Yeah, shot a 14-year-old girl. Back of the head. Now, kid's going to make it, fortunately. But what makes someone go, the best way to solve this problem of those noisy kids? Is this where we're going? And I know, Rick, it's not the gun. The gun helped. Because, without the gun, this is just an old curmudgeon out on the patio going, get off my lawn. That's all this is. And I don't know if this is the new in-chic thing. I don't know if this is the dog whistle coming out of the right-wing outrage machine. Go out and shoot the kids in your front yard. How dare they roll a ball? Man, what kind of a society are we coming to be? Now, remember, I think later on in the program, I'm going to talk about some of the emails I've gotten from my Christian friends who are very angry at me. And I throw back at them, Christian friends. All of the things that you talk about, this utopian society of theocratic rule, this utopian society where, we're all, quoting and toting the Bible around. Where are the actions? Where are the deeds? I hear your words. Hear your words. I know you are telling us you're giving some thoughts and prayers to stuff. I was always told about deeds, actions and deeds, doing stuff. How do we fix this in a much more humane, sane, rational way? I know it's not written in the book. You're gonna have to think about this one. You're gonna have to use your free will. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day the West Coast Maritime Strike began. It was an historic strike that shut down the major ports along the Pacific coast. The strike also coincided with the pivotal Minneapolis Teamster strike and the Toledo Autolite strike. From Seattle to San Diego, longshoremen walked off the job. Harry Bridges led the Albion Hall Caucus in San Francisco. They demanded higher wages, shorter hours, and union representation. They also demanded a coast-wide agreement and a union hiring hall to replace the hated daily shape-up. Longshoremen were fed up with the gangster-run company union that controlled the arbitrary day labor hiring on the docks. From the pages of the Waterfront Worker newsletter, militant longshoremen took on the shippers, the government, craft unionism, and racism of the union. On the first day of the strike, dozens of black longshoremen joined the union and convinced others not to scab. Soon, all unions on the docks walked out in solidarity. By May 15th, the West Coast ports were completely shut down and 25,000 were out on strike by the end of the month. In his book, Workers on the Waterfront, Bruce Nelson notes the qualities that made the strike a success. He points to the militancy and discipline required to stand up to the National Guard during the deadly Maine battle on July 5th. The workers' solidarity across craft lines necessary for the San Francisco general strike that followed, a defiant rank-and-file independence, and the understanding that intensive red baiting could only serve the bosses. Though workers were forced back to work through arbitration, they were awarded their demands that fall. It would take more job actions to make those awards a reality. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Tiptoeing around the democratic process, Indiana's Republican legislature has become the latest of that ilk to slap its local school librarians with an idiotic book ban. Snuck into law behind closed doors, the partisan Hoosier law requires librarians to pull books that the learned lawmakers consider, quote, harmful to minors. Just to juice up the ignorance and arrogance of their ban, the law criminalizes failure to comply by punishing librarians with up to 2.5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. What constitutes harmful to minors? Indiana's priggish politicians declared nudity, sexual references, and offensive content to community standards to be violations. Obviously, then, books commanding that rape victims marry their rapists, as well as celebrating daughters who seduce their father to bear his children, plus endorsement of bestiality, copulation in church, women boiling their children for food, and so god-awful much more, have to be ripped from the shelves and burned. Only all of this is enshrined in the Bible, which is urged on Indiana's youngsters in Sunday schools, conveniently placed in the bedstands of every chain hotel and cited by pious lawmakers as their moral compass. The so-called Good Book is replete with the gross and explicit sexual material that Republican book censors call harmful. Indeed, a feisty civil libertarian organization named Freedom from Religion Foundation gives away book labels you can stick in Bibles, warning that, quote, literal belief in this book may endanger your health and life. This is Jim Hightower saying the books that right-wing autocrats want to ban are not pornographic. They just explore ideas that those politicians don't like, ideas that young people are already grappling with. And by the way, why not require these pious lawmakers to disclose what licentious material they've been reading before they dictate what we read?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is kind of a big deal. I saw the headline, Italy intends to exit China Belt and Road Pact as relations sour. And my ears perked up going, hey, maybe there's some way back from the Trump years void of dealing with other countries and all from 2010 forward of not helping out internationally where China stepped in and filled the void. Maybe this is a start. So here to share some thoughts on this and whether this is a big deal or not, I've asked my good friend Scott Paul to come talk with us. He's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's good to be with you as always.
So is this a big deal? Am I making too much of this? The fact that you've got Italy who's saying, you know what, we're gonna pull out of this pact because China's spent, what is it, some like $900 billion globally on these projects, and Italy's going, yeah, maybe we're gonna side back with the U.S.
Yeah, I think it is a very significant development, and it is reversing course for the Italians. They have a new government. I mean, this government didn't negotiate the Belt and Road, and so I guess it shouldn't come as a huge surprise that they want to stake out a slightly different policy. But this is pretty big. It takes an active, essentially withdraw for Italy to move out of this, which will be kind of and a poke in the eye of Beijing to do that so publicly.
Yeah.
And but I think that the Italian government understands that while Belt and Road may be attractive because of all the investment that you mentioned, Rick, there's also strings attached.
Always
And
is.
and those strings are too much to bear in a lot of ways, and it's hitting home in a lot of ways in Italy, like it is here. And I think there's concerns. I mean, Pirelli, which is probably one of the most iconic industrial brands in Italy, the tire maker. Its largest investor now is a state-owned enterprise from China. I think that raises concerns. There's a lot of other kind of washing of Chinese products that occurs through Italy as well. And so it's been a real mixed bag. But this is big. And one of the things you pointed out, Rick, is that I think this is also the Biden administration actively trying to encourage allies to do the right thing rather than to drive them into the arms of China or a kind of indifference. So it is a step in the right direction.
Now, for those who don't know, what is the China Belt and Road Initiative? How do you see this? I know China's got their version. How do you see this, and what the goals were or are?
Yeah, well, the goals are the stated goals and the actual goals are two different things. Let's be very clear about that. I mean, the stated goal is to help develop infrastructure for trade and economic development globally, with China as a financier of this. The actual goal was to position China at the center of global commerce and to, in addition, expand its economic and military power. And just one example of this, Sri Lanka, Belt and Road member, China built a port. Turned out they're putting military vessels at that port in addition to commercial vessels, which is going to create a significant problem in the Indian Ocean. And other countries are realizing that there's a lot of strings attached to this investment as well, as that the profits are tending to flow back to Beijing. Right. From all of this.
And now this is predictable. I mean, I'm gonna take the position, and you could agree or disagree, that the Tea Party era of we can't do any foreign aid, we can't do any of that stuff, that everything we got to do is do here, and then the Trump years of turning our back on places and not and doing any of the things that we've done in the past left this void open, left this space for China to interject themselves. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I think that's really important, is that kind of isolationism left the door wide open. And then I would add one thing to that, is that the one attempt that we had with engagement, which was the Trans-Pacific Partnership that was negotiated in the Obama administration, was really misguided. And it was based on this old premise of free trade where the average people in all the countries won't see any of the benefits from this, but the elites would. Yeah. So it was rejected, in the United States, and it had. But that was like our one shot at trying to get into the game, and it was using one of those old failed neoliberal strategies. So it didn't work. I like what the Biden administration is trying to do now with an economic framework that is like, look, it's not going to make a difference if the tariffs are any lower, but let's have some real rules for the game that are going to benefit working people, that can expand some trade and investment, but to do it in a way that could be mutually beneficial, and also to get some of the supply chains, understanding that the United States isn't going to bring all the stuff back from China. That's just, we don't have the capacity to do that, quite honestly, but that our allies should get some of that as well coming out of China. And that it becomes a much more reliable, resilient sourcing strategy for global companies.
And maybe we don't allow a country to use slave labor. Maybe we go there. And I know that the Committee on China had a hearing. the conversation around employment labor participation and labor abuses. I know that came up. Walk me through some of that.
Yeah, I think this is important because there is this select committee on China, which I think is good because it shows more of a congressional interest in this as well, which should drive the Biden administration to do even more on this. And one of the areas they're looking at is the economy, security, human rights, and how all of that intersects. And you have this unfortunate perfect storm of these Chinese shopping apps that are very popular in the United States. They're two of the top 5 apps on the on the Android or the iPhone right now, and they use this commercial model where they're sourcing from regions in China where there's a genocide underway against the Uyghur people, who are a Muslim Turkic population that is differentiated from the Han Chinese, but it's been subject to a lot of abuse, and the United States has called this a genocide. And there's forced labor that's taking place for supplying cotton or spinning some of it or to produce some of these garments, and it's all over a bunch of different supply chains. And we have a law that's designed to stop that. It's called the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. But and this is important, the way that these Chinese shopping apps operate is direct to consumer. And so they can evade a lot of the trade laws that we have in place. It's very convoluted. And believe me, there will be attempts to fix this legislatively. But to this committee's credit, they're trying to open the public's eyes to all of these challenges that we see with these shopping apps because they're so popular. And, this hasn't got as much attention as TikTok has because of just the kind of the social media aspect of TikTok. But this is really, really probably even more economically important than TikTok, and also probably has much more of an ethical dilemma here than TikTok does as well. And believe me, there are big problems with TikTok.
All of them. No, look, I mean, when the whole TikTok debacle was going on, when it was in the news, and I guess we've missed that cycle's over now. We don't seem to care, I guess. Is that where we are? I was saying these other apps because 4 of the top 5 apps in the country were Chinese apps, and I'm like, these are people who are collecting your data. These are the people who have your home address, your credit card information. These folks got a lot on you, and we're okay with that. There's no, because I think a lot of people believe that there are protections in place for them, when I don't believe there are any whatsoever.
No, and there have been documented cases where what these companies are saying about data protection or the Chinese government's access to it isn't the case. And so just allowing them to operate freely in the United States, particularly when our guys don't have the same opportunity in Beijing, never will have the same opportunity in China. Just to have that kind of asymmetry and to expose us like that, all for the sake of watching a stupid 15-second dance video and finding a piece of a garment that's going to last you about 2 months before it disintegrates, but it's made by Uyghur slaves. That seems like a ridiculous thing, yet it's happening. Yeah. And we should care about it. And so I'm glad there is some attention.
No, we should be angry about it, angry at our government for not addressing this sooner. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Scott Paul. Scott's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website, if you want to take a look at the work that they do. But I got to get your thought on this other story. It broke yesterday that this Princeton Review and Tutor.com evidently are now owned by a Chinese private equity firm. This app and this Princeton Review, this is where a lot of our soldiers end up going when they're going for higher education. It's where a lot of our GI money is going. We're basically opening up for students, or I should say we're opening up for China, all of our students and the access to information. And my mind goes into some very dark places about, the kind of propaganda. I mean, you got the dance videos and the stuff that comes with it. This is higher ed. This is this is something different for me. This is scary for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I'm glad that you raised this up because I do think that there's obviously some some xenophobia about China or Chinese people, and I don't like any of that. I don't agree with any of that. But that does not mean that we should not scrutinize investments like this. And in this case, I think the investments do raise concerns. And those concerns are exactly what you are raising up, is that this is one of the foundational pieces of higher education. And will Chinese directors have a say in curriculum or how this is administered? Or will it crowd out others as well because the cost of capital is a little different in China? And will this become even more kind of monopolistic? And so there's major concerns about this, which is why there must be more scrutiny about both investments from countries of concern that are coming into the United States, as well as our companies' investments in countries like China or Russia or wherever.
Yeah.
And what the implications of that may be for our economic security, our national security. And there are mechanisms in place, but I think they're far too weak.
Yeah,
right
I mean,
now.
the fact is, and I'm going to steal from the Wall Street Journal article where I saw this at. They said that Tutor.com has a long-standing contract to provide its services free to active duty, reserve, and other U.S. military service members. Also holds contract with school districts, including Los Angeles, Patterson, New Jersey, Loudoun County, Virginia. Also, it's a vetted vendor at the Texas Education Agency, New Hampshire Department of Education, and many other states.
Yeah.
This is something that's gotten into our school system. And look, you said it a moment ago. The Chinese would never give us the kind of access. The Chinese government is never going to give us the kind of reciprocal access that they're getting from us. So for me, this kind of stuff has to stop on a certain level.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that, again, we need to pause all of this before we figure out what kind of impacts this investment will have. What is the situation with respect to data and data privacy and the access that the Chinese government or intelligence agencies might have to it? Because we've seen what they will do with critics who are even overseas.
Yep.
In the United States or other countries. They don't respect international borders here. And so, unfortunately, we can't assume the best intentions for the Chinese government. We have to assume that there is going to be malintent, and that means we've got to scrutinize this more, and we have to protect the interests of consumers in the United States, as well as our economic and national security.
Yeah, I don't want to be xenophobic, and just because it's a Chinese person that owns it, that's not my problem. It's the Chinese Communist government. We don't have the same access. If you live here and you're Chinese and you own this company, I don't really care.
Yeah.
The connection to the Chinese Communist government, that's what I have a problem with.
Right. I agree. And there are many awesome Chinese American entrepreneurs who have made it big, who have made our country a better place, and we need to lift them up and protect them. That is not what we're talking about here. You're exactly right, is that these, the investment coming from China should raise concerns in part because of the system of government, because of the track record of Beijing, and also, to your point, reciprocity, is that we just don't have similar access in China. So why should they be making a bigger buck off of American consumers when our companies really don't have any shot like that in China right now?
Finally, I want to get some of your thoughts on, you guys are running a call to action.
Yeah.
I want folks to reach out to our Department of Transportation, our Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. I guess until May 22nd, can go to americanmanufacturing.org, sign up. What are they signing up for?
Yeah, so right now the Department of Transportation is soliciting comments on whether or not to end a long-time waiver of a Buy America requirement. And this waiver was for what we called manufactured products. There's Buy America for iron and steel, and that's in the law. But for a long time, there's been this waiver that Buy America, when we're doing infrastructure funding, doesn't have to apply necessarily to manufactured products. We're saying get rid of the waiver. The Department of Transportation is asking for comments on this. And so it's crunch time. We're at the end of this, and there's some big, enormous contracting companies that want to keep this waiver in place because they can make more money that way. But at the end of the day, it costs American jobs. And this president, Joe Biden, wants to be a made in America, Buy America president. And so this is a real test, I think, for the department and for the administration. So it's important that voices be heard. And it's really easy just to click through, add your name to this, and it will make a big impact because folks at the Department of Transportation will be required by law to take a look at the comments that are submitted.
Good stuff. And you go to AmericanManufacturing.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Add your name, add a comment, have your voice heard. And most certainly, we want our infrastructure and our things built here with things made here. Seems simple. Scott, appreciate the time. As always, good stuff, my friend.
You bet, Rick. Thanks so much. Thanks for lifting up that action as well. Appreciate it.
Our good friend Scott Paul. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that employees at the Farrah Manufacturing Company went out on strike. The company was one of the top producers of men's and boys' pants in the country, and the second largest employer in El Paso, Texas. The majority of workers were Chicano. More than 80% were women. These workers worked long hours for low wages and were required to meet a high quota demand. In the late 1960s, some of the male employees began to discuss their working conditions and what they could do to change things. One employee remembered the early days of organizing sometimes happened after softball games between the teams of workers from the different departments in the plant. We'd sit around after the game and talk about these things and the union. Men working in the cutting room voted to affiliate with the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America. Workers from the San Antonio plant came to El Paso to support the union effort. These workers were fired. In response, 500 El Paso workers walked off the job. They demanded the right to have a union. Soon, more than 3,000 Farrah employees went out on strike. The strike cause won the support of the Roman Catholic bishop in El Paso, who supported a boycott against Farrah pants. The AFL-CIO called for a boycott. The campaign against Farrah soon spread across the country. Even though the company brought in scab replacement labor, the effort to get a union continued. The fight wore on until March of 1974, when the National Labor Relations Board found in favor of the employees who had been fired. Unionization had come to Farrah. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So my favorite tweet today, the tweet of the day, Mandy Patinkin, the actor, he tweeted out with a video of himself, and for the people watching on video, I'm going to play the 17-second video of Mandy Patinkin. Here it is. There's the 17 seconds. We're about halfway through. Yep, he's still doing it. You hear that? Oh, Mandy tweeted out, he said, "This is what I would be doing on TV without writers. Writers are asking for fairness when the studios invest millions in producing films or a series, they can pay for the value writers create. And I'm going, wow, what a novel concept. Actually paying workers what they create and what they're worth. What a marvelous thought that would be. And it's one of these things where you go, I'm fully behind the Writers Guild getting the wages that they earn, the compensation that they earn, and the fact that they're out on strike. People in the community should be supporting them, and they are. I mean, it's quite amazing. Now, there's this guy Adam Conover. He's one of the executives for the Writers Guild of America. He's also one of the guys who used to be on a TV show that my kids used to love. It was called Adam Ruins Everything. And Adam ruins this as well on the strike line, which I think is an important moment. So this is the tweet from Adam Conover that I wanted to share a little bit. There's audio to this one. There just isn't silence like the last one. But here's Adam Conover.
It's a little bit complicated. So most unions have no strike clauses in their contracts. That means that while they're under contract, they can't strike. They can't fully do a sympathy strike, right? But it's also every individual worker's individual right to not cross a picket line. So even though IATSE cannot, declare a sympathy strike, they have told their members it's up to each of you individually if you want to cross a line or not. And since most of them are good union members, that's a hard decision for some of them. Now, we don't particularly judge, that guy crossed, that guy didn't, because everyone's in their own situation. Maybe somebody, needs to feed their family and they know they're going to get replaced if they don't cross the picket line. But we want to make that a hard decision. And so any amount of solidarity is good solidarity. And the Teamsters specifically have a very blanket, Teamsters do not cross picket lines policy that's deep in their culture. So that's why, the whole goal is to stop the Teamster trucks.
Now, here's the thing. This is where Adam, I'm of the mindset you never cross a picket line, ever. Ever, not even clinically. You don't do it. You don't scab on another person's strike line. You do not do that. And he's a lot more forgiving than I would ever be if someone crossed my picket line. But the difference is in the reason, and I want to throw this out because it's good on the Teamsters, and a lot of unions have this in their contracts. In my master freight agreement contract, throughout all the years that I've worked, there is an article in the Constitution, Article 9 of our contract, the protection of rights part of it, that says that you don't cross a picket line. You will not be discharged. You will not be disciplined. You will not be replaced. But you do not have to touch struck goods. You don't have to cross a picket line. You don't have to move struck goods. This is not just in the culture, it's in the contract. And this is where, again, having a union be able to say we're not doing it is a real power for working people. Because he said, look, like Adam said, look, that's an individual choice. I would hope no one would do it because, well, a scab is the lowest form of, well, I'm not going to go that right now. You don't scab on another person's, on their picket line, ever. But it's if you get it into the contracts, this gives working people more power. And it's my view that the more we stick together, the more we stand shoulder to shoulder, instead of crossing the picket line, maybe walk on the picket line, the better it's going to be for all of us. So good on them. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back.
Every time the alert comes on, we're on the alert. You want to look and yet you're scared to look because they might say it's your town that's actually on fire.
Early, intense wildfire outbreak pushes Alberta, Canada into state of emergency. Study concludes Spain's record-shattering extreme heat impossible without climate change. Plus, offshore wind farms are far less dangerous to birds than previously thought. Study finds
Lies in that study. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Freedoms they're under attack. They feel it every day. They see it when they watch the news, whether it's your light bulbs, your toilet flushers, your shower heads, your gas stoves, or this week, your washing machines.
Well, thank you for that list of things that nobody is taking away from anyone. Senator Marsha Blackburn, you loon. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, you never report on all of the things that are being taken away from people. Why is that?
You mean I don't report on all the things that aren't happening?
You don't report on imaginary things. That is correct.
True.
What do you got for us today that isn't imaginary?
Well, first, very tragic news. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, over 400 people were killed and entire villages swept away after torrential rains triggered catastrophic flooding. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called it, quote, yet another illustration of accelerating climate change and its disastrous impact on countries that have done nothing to contribute to global warming. Meanwhile, early extreme summer heat is striking across the northern hemisphere. The unseasonable heat and windy conditions have already unleashed an early and intense wildfire season in Alberta, Canada, where a provincial state of emergency was declared over the weekend. Fire crews are battling more than 110 active fires in the province, 31 classified as out of control. As Alberta wildfire spokesperson Christy Tucker explained,
that's significantly more wildfire activity for this time of year than we've certainly seen any time in the recent past. It's going to get hotter, it's going to get windier, and we're expecting some extreme wildfire behavior.
Alberta is a major tar sands oil producer, and the fires have forced companies to shut down production. But so far, oil facilities do not appear to be in immediate danger.
Oh, well, thank God. I can't help but note the irony. Year after year, as we see these fires in Alberta, Canada, tar sands oil country, as you point out, causing the very conditions that are destroying them.
And a recent study in British Columbia found that even short-term exposure to wildfire smoke increases the occurrence of heart attacks and respiratory issues.
Well, keep digging that dirty, deadly tar sands oil.
In Southeast Asia, an astonishingly persistent month-long heat wave actually intensified over the weekend. One weather historian called it, quote, the longest tropical record heat event the world has experienced. Over the weekend, Vietnam hit a new all-time high national record of 111 degrees Fahrenheit. Laos and Thailand's capital of Bangkok also hit new all-time highs, and it's only May. The extreme heat has been compounded by intense smog that has intensified pollution levels. A 2022 study determined that dangerous heat waves, which are defined as hotter than 103 degrees Fahrenheit, will hit 3 to 10 times more frequently by the end of this century due to man-made climate change. In Europe, recent record-breaking April temperatures in Spain, Portugal, Algeria, and Morocco would have been, quote, almost impossible in the absence of man-made global warming. That's according to a new rapid response analysis by an international team of scientists at the World Weather Attribution Network, who also calculated that the extreme heat in Spain was made 100 times more likely by human-caused climate change. All four countries are grappling with a multi-year drought that is exacerbated by the high temperatures. The researchers also concluded that extreme heat in Europe is rising faster than computer climate models had projected.
So no more rain in Spain, mainly on the plain or otherwise.
True. Finally, a new study shows that offshore wind farms are much less dangerous to birds than previously thought and are not a major contributor to bird mortality. The 2-year study used radar and cameras to create a 3-dimensional image of birds' flight patterns at a wind installation in the UK's North Sea. No collisions were recorded between birds and wind turbines, and in fact, the study found seabirds of all species adapted to deliberately avoid offshore wind turbine rotor blades. The researchers hope the results will enable them to predict and address collision risks more accurately in the future and simplify the wind farm permitting process.
Lies, it's all lies. We all know that the wind turbines kill all the birds. Let's just go with that. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I've gotten a lot of email around the E. Jean Carroll verdict. A lot of people, thinking, hey, this is a big victory. Hey, finally he's being held accountable. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if he's being held accountable for anything. It doesn't look good. But even out of this, it's not what he should be getting out of it. Thanks to George Santos and them arresting him. So I don't know what this is going to mean, and I don't really care. This was never important to me as a get Trump moment. I think Georgia, that's what I want to focus on. But here to share some thoughts on whether this matters, whether I'm wrong or not, I've asked our good friend Bill Scheer to come share some thoughts with us. Bill is the political editor, the politics editor over at the Washington Monthly. Bill, thanks for taking time for us.
Always a pleasure to talk to you.
So is this a big deal? Does this change anything? Does this matter? Is it a BFD?
The Trump verdict?
Yes.
Well, this is yet another test of the Republican Party's integrity, and also I think their political intelligence. They should want to excise Trump from their party. Trump is dead weight. He has been a net negative for the GOP the last 3 election cycles, 2018, 2020, 2022. His one victory was a fluke, just barely snuck in without winning the popular vote. There's no reason to think he is the savior. I'm not saying it's impossible for him to win again. Obviously, you can see the confluence of events if the economy turns sour or Joe Biden literally collapse on a stage, for example. But you wouldn't want to put all your eggs in the Trump basket if you had the choice. Yet every time there's been an opportunity to say no mas, the leading Republicans don't take him out. When the indictment happened from Madden DA, they attacked the Madden DA. Now you have a jury verdict. I mean, there should be 100 Republican voices demanding he withdraw from the race.
Yeah, there's only one now, right?
Was Asa Hutchinson is the only one who said something along those lines?
Maybe 2. Nancy Mace has come out and said something.
Oh, Nancy Mace. Well, there's definitely the kingfish of the Republican Party, Nancy Mace. I mean, Ron DeSantis. I mean, step up, buddy. You are getting lapped by
Trump is crushing him. The latest poll has him up by 41.
Yes. What are you waiting for? Take your shot. But I mean, I grant that it's hard for one person to do it. This is a collective action problem. But I guarantee you there are several hundred elected Republicans that want to see Trump out of there, but just don't have the gumption to do it. But if they worked in concert, maybe they'd get somewhere. And the fact that they can't do it here, I mean, I heard folks say, well, because I've been negative about the way DeSantis has handled things, and some of his defenders said, "Oh, don't worry, wait till he gets in. Wait till he gets in. He'll start taking his swings. He's no chump." Well, you can't expect him to do it for the Manhattan DA because that was such a phony indictment anyway. Wait till something real happens. Okay, I'm waiting. Here I am waiting. What's it going to take? These are the same people that wanted Bill Clinton to resign because he was one for having a mirror affair with Monica Lewinsky or being accused of sexual harassment from Paula Jones. Where are they now?
Yeah.
Well,
those were Democrats. That's the difference. No, this is the weird place we're in because it seems like every one of these scandals, seems to make him stronger with the base. And I think that's what the elites are afraid of. They're afraid that they're going to lose their job, so they don't want to get on the bad side of Trump's base, which I think is shrinking. To be honest with you, Because even my neighbors who are rah Trump are flying DeSantis flags.
Well, look, I mean, to be a little charitable to our Republican friends, they're in a tough position because there clearly is a very devout Trump base that if they stayed home, they would not win elections. So I understand the surface logic. Well, we got to find a way to maintain our Trump base, but get beyond that to get to 50% or get to an electoral college majority. And so we have to be more careful. We have to finesse this. We have to do a little wink, wink here, wink, wink there, so we can appeal to the middle without losing, the hardcore. But everything that we have seen about the way Trump operates, how Trump overshadows whatever other positives Republicans might have, this is a cancer on the party. And it may mean losing in the short run to excise the tumor. But there's no reason to believe that letting the tumor grow is a long-term strategy. So when these opportunities present themselves, they need to seize the moment. And every time they shirk from it because they're afraid of the short run. They refuse to think long run because they're so afraid of the short run.
Which is weird because the Republicans have always historically been the long game players. So that's why this is interesting to me. Now, I want to get your thoughts on the George Santos thing, which has taken some of the air out of the Trump bubble of this news cycle. Is this a big deal?
I don't think the average voter pays attention to much to Santos. He's sort of a sideshow story. It's not as evident what the grander import is to the average person. I mean, Trump is literally the Republican frontrunner. Trump is
so then the big question of this, and then we'll move on because I don't want to spend too much time on Santos. Will he show up in drag?
I don't expect that, of course, but it is relevant whether Republicans cut him loose or not. I mean, if he resigns, that's a lost vote in the House, and the House majority is that narrow. So, you have seen Republicans kick Steve King to the curb, for example, but they were fairly confident that he would be replaced by Republicans, so there wasn't as much of a risk. If Santos actually was forced out or pressured out, and there's a special election, they would probably lose that special election. And just to do the basic functioning of government requires every last, vote McCarthy and get his hands on. So it really puts him in a tough position in that respect.
Right.
And that's why I think you'll probably see McCarthy not want to force Santos out on the logic that the average voter probably isn't paying that close attention to it.
Right.
And they need the vote.
Now, because they've lost another vote today with Texas Republican Brian Slayton. He's out the door now because of the ethics.
This is on. Oh, I'm not aware of this story.
Well then. The good God-fearing Christian Republican representative from Texas, Brian Slayton, evidently he was getting his 19-year-old staff member drunk and having his way with him. And that's bad.
So he resigned?
No, they went through the ethics process, and they voted today to oust him.
Oh, wow. I did not know this. But you need a 2/3 vote to actually expel him, right?
Well, they went. This is out of the ethics committee. So we'll see where that goes from here. But I gotta assume he's done. No.
Well, I assume if there's an ethics vote that was a unanimous bipartisan vote, that's a 50-50 split in the ethics committee. It would seem logical that Republicans will follow suit and actually expel him. But I would gather if he's a Republican congressperson from Texas, I'm guessing he's not in a swing district. I'm guessing that'll be replaced with another Republican in fairly short order. So
yeah, I screwed that up. My bad. He was a House member in Texas. My bad.
This is a state house.
Yeah, I screwed that up.
Okay.
I was hoping. Yeah, as I'm saying it, I'm going, that was dumb. Why did I jump in the middle of that? But here again, you've got these moments where there's a lot of scandal going on that side of the aisle that needs to be dealt with. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Bill Scheer. Bill is the political editor over at the Washington Monthly, WashingtonMonthly.com, the website. Want to get your thoughts on the big meeting today with the president and Speaker McCarthy. Are we surprised that nothing came out of it?
I disagree that nothing came out of it. I think the fact that they said staff is going to meet, the party leaders are going to meet on Friday. They scheduled a day. Biden gave a press conference and said that clawing back unspent COVID funds is on the table, which is effectively making a concession in public. I think there's genuine movement here. If they came out and just, talk trash about each other and didn't schedule anything, then I think you'd see, some market panic. They're sending signals here that the game is afoot. Biden said that, and almost every Democrat has said, we're not going to negotiate to a gun to our head. We're not going to negotiate if they're threatening default. But McCarthy did not promise to pass a clean debt limit hike, and yet negotiations are moving forward. So I think there's obviously a long way to go. I'm not saying that it's not going to be a bumpy road from this point forward, but my general attitude is I don't think either Biden or McCarthy wants to default.
No, I don't think so.
And I don't think either one of them have said anything to preclude a deal. There's not a lot of red lines being drawn here. There's not a lot of non-negotiable demands being made. So there's a lot of room for a deal. I think there is desire for a deal. And usually when you have those two things, you get to a deal.
My problem is I look at McCarthy, he's holding on to power, and I would argue in a very slim fashion. And you've got the Freedom Caucus folks who, in my view, I think they do want to shoot the hostage. And I don't know that McCarthy has a lot of wiggle room. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, McCarthy, he has a very tenuous majority. He has, a few Freedom Caucus types who have suggested they're willing to actually shoot the hostage and default on the debt. But apologies for the dog. But you also have 18 Republicans in Biden-won districts, and he can only lose 5 votes to lose a majority. So he is, I would assume McCarthy is much like Pelosi was before, attentive to the needs of those that make the majority. The Biden district members make the majority, not the Freedom Caucus people. So he is much more constrained in the kinds of threats he can make because he would then risk losing those relative moderates. When people talk about what happened in 2011 and the debt limit talks there, that was on the heels of the Tea Party victory in 2010, netting 63 seats. There are 242 Republicans in the majority at that point. So Boehner, who wasn't necessarily a Tea Party guy himself, there was a sense of a mandate for doing something big on the budget that Boehner had to be sensitive of. This midterm was practically a Democratic victory. The Republicans barely took the majority. And so McCarthy, John Boehner in 2011 said, we're not going to raise the debt limit unless the cuts are bigger than the amount we're raising the debt limit. There was a specific ask. McCarthy has done nothing like that because he doesn't have the ability to be that provocative without alienating those in the middle. So he's been being much more of a reasonable figure. I just want to talk. We passed the bill, but that's just a starting point. We just want to Biden have the negotiations. So yeah, the thing that McCarthy has to worry about is if he did a deal with Biden, it only takes one member to do a so-called motion to vacate and put the speakership itself on the floor, sort of fire McCarthy.
Right.
And if there was a party line vote and 5 Republicans broke ranks, he's no longer speaker. That is the so-called sword hanging over McCarthy's head. I have not seen the Freedom Caucus people wave that sword. McCarthy promised in January when he got the gavel, I'm going to push for a 10-year balanced budget plan. That's the promise I give to you in order for you to vote for me for Speaker. Where is it?
Exactly.
It's nowhere. He put a bill on the floor that is nowhere near a 10-year balanced budget, and those Freedom Caucus guys, they shut up. So I am not convinced that these Freedom Caucus people have the moxie to actually shoot the hostage being McCarthy. And so if McCarthy thinks, you know what, I have already proven that I can move away from those extreme demands, put a bill on the floor, most of those guys will vote for it. No one's talking about taking off my head. If I do a deal with Biden to avert a default, and I get, 180 Republicans plus Democrats to pass it, maybe I can get away with that and not lose my speakership. Because if they fire him, who do they replace him with? Do they even want the job themselves? That job is not fun. I'm not want to make hard predictions here. Maybe they will do a motion to vacate, but we haven't seen them making those threats, even though McCarthy has moved away from the extreme demands.
So you feel confident something's going to get done, and we're not going to see any of the extremes on either side. Biden invoking the 14th Amendment and going down that road. Or the default.
Well, yeah, I think McCarthy doesn't. McCarthy is more like Boehner and McConnell. He doesn't see the political upside in being seen as the agitator for a default, and so he's not eager to let things go that far. If there was a default and Biden took the blame, then fine. But he doesn't want to be seen as itching for it. And so he's not making unreasonable demands. 2013, Ted Cruz said, defund Obamacare. That was ridiculous. Any reasonable person would know that Obama's not going to defund Obamacare. And so you start playing hostage with something that's, manifestly unreasonable, that blows back on you. McCarthy's just saying, let's talk. Let's cut spending somewhere, some number. He's even being specific about the number. That makes it hard to paint him as the instigator, which is where I think McCarthy wants to be. Now, Biden, here's another difference between today and 2011. 2011, we're still in the early stages of recovery from the Great Recession.
Right.
Unemployment is still very high. It coming down from 10% to 9%, still very high. Growth was not gangbusters. So there was a sense amongst Obama and other economists that it's too soon to go back to a deficit reduction. We still need to prime the pump here. And here comes John Boehner talking about big cuts. It's not the right time for it. So he was very reluctant to go down that path, but was forced to do some cuts because, Boehner played hardball. Right now, unemployment is at historic lows. And GDP we've had positive growth last 3 quarters. Unemployment is low. Wages are up. What's the problem in the economy? It's inflation. And inflation is being met with the Fed raising interest rates. That's trying to tamp down demand. You don't want to do cuts. Obama even said in his memoir, wrong time for cuts because demand is weak. Right now, demand is not weak. The Fed is trying to contain demand. So Biden wants the soft landing. Biden wants to get inflation down without tipping into recession. So big cuts might risk recession. They're little cuts. Maybe that's complementary to what the Fed is doing, and you can tamp down demand just enough so you don't tip into recession, but you reduce inflation, and Biden can say, hey, we got to have that jam. To layer on top of all this stuff, you have a deadline on September 30th to keep the government open, and they're going to be talking about the budget anyway.
Yeah.
So that's why I think they could come to this deal, because at some point in the very near future, there's going to be some kind of cuts to keep the government open. Why not do it in June instead of September?
There you go. Well, we'll see. Bill, I appreciate the time, the expertise, the input. Good stuff. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Take care.
Our good friend Bill Scheer. Make sure you check out the work that he does over at the Washington Monthly. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see where all this plays out. And look, nobody wants a default. At least I want to believe nobody wants to see a default and what the horrible that comes out of that. Let's quick go to the phones. Got Gary on line 1 from Florida. Gary, what's on your mind?
Hey, how are you doing? I was wondering what your opinions were on the new Florida open carry law.
I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not a huge fan of people walking around with guns all over the place. Having grown up in a housing project where I've seen people shot, more guns to me just means more chaos.
I've purchased like several weapons since then because I don't need a permit at this point. You know what I mean?
Right.
July 1st, man. It's kind of like, and that's 4th of July. We're gonna tune it up. 4th of July is gonna be crazy.
I guarantee you are right on that front. I think it will be crazy. I think we will see lots of interesting stories to talk about. But I appreciate the thoughts, Gary. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You have a good night. But here's the thing: in the states that have the most guns, this isn't me making this up. You have the higher death rates, and my point is more guns does not mean more safety. More guns doesn't, like John Stewart said. When do we reach peak safety? How many more guns do we need to get to that safety? For instance, Mississippi has the highest death rate per 100,000 people. They have a really high and a very easy gun laws. Louisiana, New Mexico, Alabama, Wyoming, Alaska, Montana, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Georgia, all over 20 per 100,000 deaths. Now, these are the easy gun states. These are hey, carry them wherever you want, tote them. The state with probably the highest number of restrictions, Massachusetts, has just 3.4 gun deaths per 100,000. And you look at these numbers, places where everyone isn't packing heat. You don't have this. Perfect example. Talking about the Louisiana situation, you had the guy who he had to get those kids out of his yard. Where yelling wasn't enough, get off my lawn wasn't enough. He shot him. So, this is where my struggle with this is. And I'm not anti-gun. I believe that people have the right to go hunting and to protect their home. My problem is man, when it's there, did you see the thing in Florida where the two guys are driving down the road firing shots at each other? And the two guys didn't hit each other. Didn't hit each other. They hit each other's kids. This is my problem with everyone having guns. Because I know I have bad luck. I know when two people are going to get mad at each other and they're going to start shooting at each other, they're both going to hit me. So this is kind of a self-preservation thing. But I appreciate the call. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith. and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that employees at the Farrah Manufacturing Company went out on strike. The company was one of the top producers of men's and boys' pants in the country, and the second largest employer in El Paso, Texas. The majority of workers were Chicano. More than 80% were women. These workers worked long hours for low wages and were required to meet a high quota demand. In the late 1960s, some of the male employees began to discuss their working conditions and what they could do to change things. One employee remembered the early days of organizing sometimes happened after softball games between the teams of workers from the different departments in the plant. We'd sit around after the game and talk about these things and the union. Men working in the cutting room voted to affiliate with the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America. Workers from the San Antonio plant came to El Paso to support the union effort. These workers were fired. In response, 500 El Paso workers walked off the job. They demanded the right to have a union. Soon, more than 3,000 Farrah employees went out on strike. The strike cause won the support of the Roman Catholic bishop in El Paso, who supported a boycott against Farrah pants. The AFL-CIO called for a boycott. The campaign against Farrah soon spread across the country. Even though the company brought in scab replacement labor, the effort to get a union continued. The fight wore on until March of 1974, when the National Labor Relations Board found in favor of the employees who had been fired. Unionization had come to Farrah. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Tiptoeing around the democratic process, Indiana's Republican legislature has become the latest of that ilk to slap its local school librarians with an idiotic book ban. Snuck into law behind closed doors, the partisan Hoosier law requires librarians to pull books that the learned lawmakers consider, quote, harmful to minors. Just to juice up the ignorance and arrogance of their ban, the law criminalizes failure to comply by punishing librarians with up to 2.5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. What constitutes harmful to minors? Indiana's priggish politicians declared nudity, sexual references, and offensive content to community standards to be violations. Obviously, then, books commanding that rape victims marry their rapists, as well as celebrating daughters who seduce their father to bear his children, plus endorsement of bestiality, copulation in church, women boiling their children for food, and so god-awful much more, have to be ripped from the shelves and burned. Only all of this is enshrined in the Bible, which is urged on Indiana's youngsters in Sunday schools, conveniently placed in the bedstands of every chain hotel and cited by pious lawmakers as their moral compass. The so-called good book is replete with the gross and explicit sexual material that Republican book censors call harmful. Indeed, a feisty civil libertarian organization named Freedom from Religion Foundation gives away book labels you can stick in Bibles, warning that, quote, literal belief in this book may endanger your health and life. This is Jim Hightower saying the books that right-wing autocrats want to ban are not pornographic. They just explore ideas that those politicians don't like, ideas that young people are already grappling with. And by the way, why not require these pious lawmakers to disclose what licentious material they've been reading before they dictate what we read?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, they said today that their small business optimism index has dropped 1.1%. It is at 89%, they said last month, the lowest level since January of 2013. Now, look, I don't put any stock in what the NFIB says. In my view, one of a very anti-worker group. But look, you know, this idea that there's small business angst out there, I don't disagree with. And you look at what's going on in D.C. with the debt ceiling debacle, this is not good for small businesses. It's not good for working people. And here to share some thoughts on just what what we should be doing. In fact, the group that he's a part of, Small Business for America's Future, they've put out a letter of 100 small business owners saying, hey, Congress, President, do your job. That's why I've asked Shondell Newsom to come talk with us. Shondell's a Small Business for America's Future co-chair. He's also the founder of Some New Marketing. If you want to check out their website, smallbusinessforamericasfuture.org. We'll get links out on social media. Shondell, thanks for taking time for us.
It's my pleasure, Rick. I'm happy to be here.
So you guys put out this letter, 100 of folks just like you, small business owners, saying, hey, this could hurt us. This could be bad for small businesses. What do you want them to do? What's the ask? What's the demand?
Well, at the end of the day, they need all to come together and do their job. They have to make sure that they go ahead and close the gap and go ahead and pass the debt ceiling and increase the debt ceiling so that we can get on with our lives. I mean, we just got out of what I consider my toughest 2.5, 3 years in business with the global pandemic. I went through the Great Recession as well. We are resilient, but we don't like to be played with a lot. Small business owners are mainstream. We're not sitting trying to make extra money. We're taking care of our lives. We're working hard every day to stay in the game, and we're taking care of our employees.
Yeah, I mean, this to me has always been a stupid thing. This debt ceiling to me has always seemed stupid. We've raised it 78 times since 1960, 3 times under Trump. I've got friends who were in Congress in the past said, we used to go, it was a yawn vote. You went, you raised the debt ceiling because you already spent the money. So as a small business owner, let me ask you, if you had the chance to go, we spent all this money on capital improvements, we spent all this money on materials, we just decide, we're not going to pay it. Would you?
Right. No, not at all. A small business owner, as a matter of fact, we're even better than that. We're like making sure that everything is in place so we can keep the ball rolling, right? We have to make payroll. We have to pay our rent. We have to take care of the internet, whatever we have to do. So we're ahead of the game. We're not playing this little game. Like, just imagine if I walked in tomorrow and I told my employees, hey, you know what? I'm going to decide not to pay my bills and you all can just figure it out. That's kind of what they're doing to us right now.
No, and look, that's what they're doing to the federal government's employees. They're on a limb now, going, "Hey, am I going to have more paydays coming like we had in the past? This is ridiculous. It should be done away with." Which is why your organization is calling for lawmakers to pass a clean debt ceiling bill. What does that mean?
Well, basically, at the end of the day, is just make good on what you've already spent. All it is we've already spent the money, like you alluded to, is Social Security, is things that have already been laid out. And again, as a small business owner, if I've already paid the bill, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of a lot of times we get contracts and we pay the bills, and then we get our invoice paid, and we got to pay those back, right? That's what it seems to me. I mean, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer all the time, but I think it's pretty simple. Like, you've already spent this money. Now your invoice is getting paid. Go ahead and pay the debt and move on.
Yeah, for the people who tell us the economy is like the kitchen table, they're certainly not treating it that way. And for people who are trying to fear us into this belief that the Chinese are going to take over the global currency, being this irresponsible doesn't seem to be the smartest thing to do, does it?
No, it doesn't. Rick, I spent 10 years in the Air Force. And a lot of these things that I hear sometimes, whether it's on the internet or throughout social media or people just talking about it, I spent time working on drone and stealth technology, and there are a lot of things that we already know. Like, we are without a doubt the premier military forces in the world. So a lot of things, when people say somebody's going to take over, they're going to do this and do that, it's hogwash. We are so far ahead of everybody else. It's not even funny.
But there's this push right now, and if you listen to right-wing circles, the BRIC countries are coming together. You've got Brazil, Russia, India, China. There's talk of them unseating us as the world's currency, and maybe that's not going to happen. But the fact that we're the fact that we're being this irresponsible, doesn't that make an argument for the rest of the world to go, I don't know what's wrong with them over there in the U.S., but maybe they shouldn't have this privilege, this power. Maybe we should do something about that. Doesn't that seem logical?
It does. I mean, when you're looking from the outside in, if you're looking dysfunctional and you're looking like you're divided as a country or as leadership, anybody would come in. If you were playing a sports team and you looked on the other side and looked like the coaches are all confused and look like they don't know what they're doing, you're going to try to take advantage of that.
Yep.
So I don't blame them for trying to take advantage of when it looks like dysfunction and divisiveness. But I can tell you, I'm headed to D.C. next week to talk about this debt ceiling piece to the senators, to a Senate committee. And so I think really I'm going to plead to them that they get their stuff together and stop making us look bad on the world stage.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But as a small business owner, what would a default mean to you? Your business is local. There's a lot of thought that this is just them in D.C. playing the games that they're playing. How would this filter down to harm businesses like yours or the other 100 people who signed on to this letter?
One of the things that happens when they default or they do these type of things is they have cuts, and they make cuts in places where they don't think it impacts small businesses. So I'll give you a good example is like the SBA Boots to Business program. Last week, I went and spoke to almost 50 small businesses who are going to be formed by military members who are transitioning and becoming veterans. So imagine if you eliminate those type of opportunities for our transitioning veterans who want to become small business owners and entrepreneurs. If you put cuts into that, then that's going to impact a program like that. And again, when you look at the small businesses, and everybody says we're the backbone to the economy, but they say that, at a tongue in cheek, right? Last week we celebrated National Small Business Week, but really we employ over half of the employees in this country. And then like when you look in Nevada, everybody talks about the casinos and talk about the mining, but really 99.2% of the businesses in Nevada are small businesses. So we make a difference in the economy. And so when you start playing with our money, with our passion and everything like that, it just starts to put us backwards as a country.
And I think the conversation has to be made, Shondell, that there isn't a dividing line between what government does and what Main Street does. That there's a symbiotic relationship, if you will, that there's a working together that has to happen for everyone to succeed. And for far too long, one of the political parties has pushed this idea that government can't or shouldn't be able to do anything, and they're working to destroy that. That does hurt Main Street. That does hurt folks like you, doesn't it?
Sure. Yes, it does. And in fact, think about the fact that during this pandemic, this global pandemic, where would we be without the government interceding and coming in with PPP loans or coming in with disaster loans? And then this infrastructure bill, which actually helped us, especially minority businesses, by making the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, a permanent office and providing us with access to capital. There's a lot that we need. Now, what's funny is when I hear about some of the larger firms and they get tax breaks and different things like that, then all of a sudden the government is great. So I think that one thing that we have to think about is how do you make it equitable where the small businesses get all of the things that's afforded to us, similar to what Wall Street firms or larger firms get when they utilize the government.
No, I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Shondell Newsom. He's the co-chair of Small Business for America's Future, smallbusinessforamericasfuture.org, the website. We'll get links out on social media. He's also the co-founder of Some New Marketing. I want to get your thoughts on this. You said you were in the Air Force for 10 years, a veteran. One of the proposals that Republicans have is what appears to be a 22% cut across the board. I've had friends over at at AFGE tell me that applies to the Veterans Administration, which is already underfunded, which is already understaffed, overworked. All of these things. What would a cut that big mean to folks like you? What would it mean to the VA as a whole?
It's devastating. I'm a veteran. My sister-in-law, my brother, my son-in-law, my daughter, my son. So, basically when you look at cuts to the VA, and I'm a disabled veteran, so that would mean that if I had some medical services, it might extend out longer than it should be. That would mean that most of our appointments would be either cut out. I just went and got another pair of glasses, and so that means that maybe I might not be able to get my glasses for another 6 months. But there are some people even more crucial who are going and utilizing the VA hospital and utilizing the services on a regular basis. When you look at our pharmacy and look at how we may not be able to get access to some of the medicine. So you fought for this country, you did everything, you sacrificed your life. In many cases, we sacrificed our life, and that's how we'll be treated, is just as if we're another checkbox with a debt ceiling.
One of the I came across this blog the other day that said if Republicans get their way, it means that there would be 81,000 jobs lost at the VA, 30 million fewer outpatient visits, 6,000 cuts to staff, and 134,000 increase in backlogged disability claims. I got to tell you, we spent years, calling folks like you heroes, putting you up on a platform, politicians taking photos with you. This doesn't seem like how you treat a hero.
Absolutely not. And in fact, it's downright disrespectful to your point, right? My father served in Vietnam. I served in Desert Storm. My kids, one served in Afghanistan and Iraq. And as a parent, it was painstaking to watch my daughter go over to Afghanistan and go to these different countries. But at the same time, like you said, we come back and we get all these, flowers and all that. Well, the real respect is taking care of us during these type of situations. All of the accolades that you can give us mean absolutely nothing if you don't pass legislation or you don't do what you're supposed to do right by veterans, seniors, people who have really, really put it in for this country. It's downright disrespectful, Rick.
No, I remember going back through all of those years while things were going on, because I grew up during the end of the Vietnam era. I came aware, and in the housing project I grew up in, I was a minority in a minority community. They dumped those men back into our community like garbage. And
it was awful.
There was nothing for them. And I said, if we're going to go down this path, if this is what we're going to do, we can't repeat the sins of the past. And I look at this, I look at a 22% cut. That just seems,
horrible.
I don't even have the word for it. Horrible is not enough.
No, it's not.
Cruel, mean, just angering. We're going to go with that. So I guess the last line of questioning I've got for you is, look, we've laid out how bad this can be for small business, how bad it's going to be for veterans. What do people do? Because there's always a sense of hopelessness. What's the empowerment moment out of this, Shondell?
Well, I think people need to make sure that they reach out to their legislators and talk to those folks and just flood them with talking about anything from cutting Social Security, cutting veterans benefits, to all the things that can possibly go wrong. Me and my business, Rick, you know what? I always tell my staff, you can only cut but so much. At some point, you got to raise revenue. At some point, you got to make sure that you take care of things from a business standpoint to keep it flowing. And like in this case, most of these things have already been paid for. So all we got to do is just raise the debt ceiling. Like you said, the million times that we've done it before, it was no issue. And even coming out of our former President Trump's mouth one time, you can't negotiate with a debt ceiling. That is non-negotiable. And definitely a 22% cut or any type of cut to veteran services is downright non-negotiable. So I just think they have to just do what they have to do, and everybody should reach out to their legislators and just let them know how they feel.
I know I said last question, but you hit something that caught my nerve. Because you don't hear small businesses talk like this very often. You said you got to raise revenue.
Yes.
And you look at the fact that, in polling, the vast majority of people in this country want the wealthy to pay higher taxes.
Absolutely.
I keep saying we need to dig up the good socialist President Dwight David Eisenhower and return to that kind of a tax code. Are you advocating for higher taxes on on businesses, on the wealthy? What are you going for?
So here's what I'll say. Here's what I always say. When it comes down to me as a small business owner, I'm paying my fair share of taxes. I think everybody should. I don't think anybody should get a break or get anything special just because they've acquired a certain level of wealth. And if it's going to lean anyway, it should actually lean towards the folks who actively engage in their local communities. I don't see anyone who got those tax breaks in my community helping to sponsor baseball teams, helping to take care of their churches, buying local goods and services in our neighborhood. I know, I grew up in Brooklyn, and I remember the little corner stores and the dry cleaners and all of that. Those folks put back into the community. I don't see us going out and getting a new boat or a new house or a vacation home. What we do is we put everything right back into the community. So what I say is, yes, everybody should pay their fair share. Small businesses always pay our fair share, and we always take care of our communities at the same time. So I think every American, if you call yourself American, you should take care of your country.
I'm right there with you, Shondell. Real quick, some new marketing. What do you do?
We do a lot of public engagement, public involvement, and that's another impact. We do a lot of that with the federal government. They went around and said to small businesses, hey, you should go out and get federal contracts. You should go out and do this. You should go out and do that. So when they start playing with federal services, that impacts our business after they told us to go out and get these type of contracts. So those are the games that have an impact on us, the Americans, America's small businesses, is that we participate in the manner that our country asked us to participate. And so when we play shenanigans and games, it doesn't impact the wealthiest people, right? They go on and do what they're still on vacation somewhere or on the moon or something. We don't get to do that. We don't get to hide. We don't get to hide from our employees, Rick. When these things happen, we don't get to go into an ivory tower and get away from everything. We're right in the thick of it. So, Some New Marketing is proud to be 17 years strong, 2015 SBA Nevada Small Business of the Year. Last week, I won an award with SBA Nevada for the Entrepreneurial Spirit of the Year award, but it's because I'm passionate about small businesses. And I think that we, along with other groups, are very disrespected when these type of situations come up.
Well, I'm glad you took some time for us. Fill this in on what you're doing. Good luck in D.C. Give him hell. Do it. Bring it to him, Shondell.
I definitely will, Rick. I promise that.
Thanks so much, Shondell Newsome. He is the co-chair of Small Business for America's Future, smallbusinessforamericasfuture.org, the website, also the co-founder of Some New Marketing. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
In labor history, the year was 1970. On that day, workers and the U.S. labor movement lost a leading voice in a tragic plane crash. There is no greater calling than to serve your fellow men. There is no greater contribution than to help the weak. There is no greater satisfaction than to do it well. These inspiring words were the credo of Walter P. Reuther, the longtime leader of the United Automobile Workers. Reuther became president of the UAW in 1946 and held that position for a quarter of a century. Under his leadership, auto workers saw some of the greatest gains. The UAW was able to win improvements in job security, health care, and wages. Reuther's effective leadership caused the governor of Michigan to dub him the most dangerous man in Detroit. Reuther learned about the labor movement from his father, a member of the Brewers Union in Wheeling, West Virginia. As a young man, Reuther moved to Detroit to work in the booming auto industry, landing a job at Ford. He became involved in union organizing, gaining national prominence as he led a strike against General Motors in 1945. The next year, he was elected president of the UAW. Reuther believed that unions were part of a broader social movement and had the power to improve the lives of all working Americans. He was a strong supporter of the civil rights movement, delivering a speech at the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. As UAW president, he placed an emphasis on worker education. In 1960, the UAW built an education center in northern Michigan. Walter and his wife May were flying there when their plane plane crashed, killing them both. President Nixon called Reuther's death a deep loss not only for organized labor, but also for the cause of collective bargaining and the entire American process.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. So I got an interesting email last night. It's one of those I always love religious people who feel they need to insult at every opportunity. Taking the high road. I believe in religion and God Incorporated and all that. And then, throwing insults and barbs, which I enjoy. As I say, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Crazy, angry, mean emails to the top. And this was one of those weird kind of moments and a lot of accusations, evidently I'm centrist and left-leaning, which I guess is an insult. And I have a distaste for things religious, which is not true. I have a disdain for extremism. I have a disdain for zealotry. I have a disdain for people judging other folks who've never walked a mile in their shoes. I got some of those problems. I do. I tend to believe, as I always have said, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You lead your best life. You lead the life that you want between you and your maker. I'm not the person to tell you what to do or not to do in the confines of your four walls. But there are some who do, and they tend to skew toward this hyper religiosity, this kind of mean-spirited religion that I didn't grow up around. I grew up, with the peace and social justice Jesus. I grew up with the Jesus who would walk picket lines and heal the sick and feed the hungry. That's where I grew up. This kind of angry Jesus I'm struggling with, because it's almost as if you have folks who use this as a crutch to be who they are, angry and mean and divisive. I grew up believing that the religion was supposed to bring you together. It was supposed to be part of a community. It was supposed to make you a better person, or at least want to be a better person. More humble, less selfish. But I see in this modern era of the kind of religiosity that's being, thrown out here, it's all about everyone has their personal relationship, and everyone's going to be wealthy, and everyone's going to get what they deserve if they don't do exactly what they're told. I'm struggling with that. I grew up believing that do unto others as you'd want them to do to you, or at least don't treat someone as any worse than you would want someone to treat you badly. The golden or the silver rule, whichever makes you happy. But he goes through this list of, it was all these religious people who did all these things. And there's a rewrite of history. This idea that the country was founded by Christians is, I don't know, completely accurate. There were some, but a lot of the founding fathers were deists. So there's a lot of this. I'm claiming this portion of history for my team and my hat or my cape or whatever. Instead of using religion and faith for good, we're using it to tear each other apart. This kind of attack is, he goes after people who live in cities and all of the right wing blather that you get. But doing it in a way that it's because of you godless heathens that all this is happening. And the reality is in those cities, there are lots of religious people. Bad things happen to people regardless of their faith. So I'm just, I hope this guy, I hope it made him feel better, but it didn't make a lot of sense. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Should we be pursuing the hooray for me and the heck with you, Jesus, or the hippie liberal? Let's take care of each other. maybe not get people be homeless or hungry. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find your favorite podcasts, you will find ours and make ours your favorite. Thanks for tuning in. See you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.